Morning.
Morning.
All right. All right. A second. Svika, you good? Svika's in a different position. I think he fell asleep. No? All right, he's off. Selicha. Oh. You're good. Good morning. All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Chof Aleph. We began yesterday at the bottom of Daf Chof, Omar Rabbi Yitzchak, either Bar Ada or Bar Ami, as we have in the Mesoidas Hashas, that we limit that the heter to use the pasibirois, that it should be good even on a derabanan level, is only for the animals of the oile regalim. That was the first limit that we learned. We're going to actually learn another law of Shabbos that will be limited. We're going to limit laws, both more details regarding the pasibirois, as well as the din of burganim. Burganim is a din that we're going to learn later in ERUVIN, when we're going to be learning about eruvei techumen, that you can only walk 2,000 amas from the place where you took in Shabbos, or from where your food, so to say, through your food, where you theoretically took in Shabbos, but you don't count 2,000 amas from your dalad amas. You have what we call your makim hashvisa. So if you take in Shabbos in a city, you can walk 2,000 amas from the edge of the city. Burganim were certain type of huts that many cities built, that they were primarily used for a shomer. It was a flimsy, but yet it was a building, it was a home. So Chazal allow us to start measuring the 2,000 amas from those burganim, as long as those burganim are built within 70 and a bit amas from the city. Now, really, that means that if you have a burganim that's 70 and shirayim near the city, then when you walk another 70 amas, you have another such butkala, such little guardian's home. Then you really can start extending the 2,000 amas quite far. We're going to learn also some limitations regarding the heter of burganim. We're going to learn a lot of agadata, beginning with two agadatas from Amar Rab Chizda, Darish Mari Barmar. Then we're going to learn into various drashas of Rava, including he's going to say that Kol Ha'ever al Divrei Seifrim is Chayev Misa. Imagine, by Divrei Torah, we know, Taka, many Vedas is capital, but you haven't Divrei Torah many Vedas for where there is no capital punishment. There is only Malchus. Then you have a person generally who violates a mitzvah saseh. Of course, there are always exceptions. B'chlal, there's no punishment in a human court. Kol ha'ever al divrei seifrim is chayev misa. Not chayev misas bezdin, but like Shlomo HaMelech says in Koheles, that opoidetz gader yishichenu nachesh. But that even means begashmius, that there is some physical consequence of loss of life for violating, so to say, only a divrei seifrim. We'll explain when we learn the sugya how Hasidus explains what's taka the logic. If we're violating divrei Torah, you're not always chayav misa. Why would that be the case by divrei seifrim? We're going to learn how Shlomo HaMelech was the one that initiated the takana of netilas yadayim. It evolved. He made a takana for kayanim before they eat kachim. or Truma. Shlomo HaMelech was the one that enacted the Rabbanan of Eruvei Chatzeros, and now a heavenly voice came out and authenticated those two takanas. We're going to learn Bechlal about the great wisdom of Shlomo HaMelech. We're going to learn that Shlomo HaMelech, when he learned not only Torah, Tanach has a ta'amim. In Yiddish, it has trop. Shlomo HaMelech learned Torah Shebal Peh with trop. Rashi says he learned Mishnayos, this is before it was written, with a trop. I understand this as Bechlal by Yos, by the Rabbeim, by great Yidden. Bechlal by Yidden, when they learn Torah, they have a certain niggin that they use when they learn Torah. All of that began with, as the Gemara is going to point out, whether it began with or this was certainly practiced by Shlomo HaMelech and a lot more. We're going to start on Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph on the top line. Again, we are referring back to the statement of Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Adar or Bar Ami, that loichutru pase berois for people, they only were mated for the animals of those who were being oil regel, since there was no water available, and this was the only way that people can properly go to Yerushalayim. So only there did they allow pase berois. And just to remind ourselves that we did learn on Daf Chav that if pase berois would not have been considered on a biblical level a proper partition, Chachamim don't have the koyach to make this into a reshus hayachid. Pase berois is good. These double boards, midai raisa, anywhere, anytime. Elamad, the Chachamim normally don't allow us to rely on it because of a parts merubal ha'omed v'chulei. However, even midrabanan, like he's saying, in certain circumstances, you could rely on it, and the Gemara is going to say, "Any that can be." Like, for example, if it's only for a person, the tapas va'olam, the tapas v'yoyed, the ha'amar, I'm going with the Bach's emendation. The ha'amar Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, second line in the top of the Amid, loichutru pase berois, elo lebe'er ma'im chayim bulvad. Yes, we learned to Sunyan Daf Yud Ches. Over there, we explained it, not the way that Amoraim there don't have the approach of Shmuel over there. On Daf Yud Ches, we learned that the advantage of a be'er is since the water doesn't run out, and if the water were to run out, what did we learn also yesterday? That mayim ein kan, mechitza ein kan. Maybe when there's a rabbim, one will remind the other. That's not the approach of Shmuel. Shmuel understands that pase berois is only valid for chashav water. Now the question is why? If the whole heter is not for Adam, for a human being, we would rather drink be'er ma'im chayim. It's more chashuv than rainwater that's gathered in a pit, a water pit. Not that it's the end of the world, but it's fresher. It's even healthier. So mainly, if it's taka done for Adam, we can understand why Shmuel is saying leihutru pase berois elo be'er ma'im olvat. But if it's only for animals, asks the Gemara, mali chai mali mechonasim. For animals, there's for sure no difference between well water or rainwater. Answers the Gemara that nevertheless, the inan midi di chazil adam. In other words, since the Chachamim are allowing us to rely on what we normally would consider flimsy mechitzas, substandard mechitzas, super mechitzas ru'ois. Yes, they were mated it. They were mated it only if it's circling that which is in itself considered chashuv, which is be'er ma'im chayim. If the water is not chashuv, even though we're only using it for animals, Shmuel will still say that we can't rely midrabanan on the pase berois. Good. Baruch atah adino Eloheinu malkeinu b'shar kol nivadvai. Says the Gemara Gufa loihutru pase berois elo lebehema bulvad. Avol Adam, if people are traveling with no animals, yes, people need to drink over Shabbos, and there is a well, so pitch camp near the well or near the water pit, and Adam, metapas va'ela, metapas v'yodet. Let him climb up, let him climb down. Climbing, like Rashi says, is that if the opening, if the hole, if its diameter has the right width, then you can use both of your hands and both of your feet. I mean, you have to be in relatively good shape. And you climb down the well, and then you drink the water, and then you climb back up. You don't need to take the water out, and therefore, midrabanan, you may not rely on the pase berois. Furthermore, this is another statement that we didn't learn yesterday, but if the diameter was very wide, and it's that wide, right? Normally, right, if you're 6 feet tall, that's the rule. If you extend your hands out, it'll be 6 feet from one end to the other. But what happens if the walls are even wider? So even if you're in great shape, you are unable to climb in and climb out. Obviously, they didn't have a ladder, or we're not relying on a ladder. So then everyone is made afilo la'adam nami. Then yes, you could rely on the possibilities, even if it's only for people. And just reiterating, we learned to Tosfos at the end of yesterday's shiur, the top Tosfos in the Amid, that even when a person is able to be metapas v'olam, metapas v'yored, let's not forget one approach in Tosfos, that once you have animals, and therefore Chazal allow you to rely on the possibilities, an Adam can also rely on it. You don't have to climb in and climb out. Furthermore, says this further statement. Now we learned a lot about the statement. We're learning now a brayso. Very good. We're learning now a brayso. We're being mamshech in the brayso, and we learned this yesterday in Daf Chaf Amud Beis that even when you're using the pasibirois, don't fill up the waters and hold the bucket in your hand, hold the keli in your hand, and have the animal drink while you're holding it, like we explained yesterday, because if I have it in my hand, it's common for the animal to move around. And if the animal is going to move its head outside the pasibirois, I will just naturally go along with it. But outside the pasibirois, I'm already in a reshus harabim. Now I'm carrying from a reshus hayachid into a reshus harabim. Aval, what should you do? Mamalihu, you should use the pasibirois, fill up the water, take the water out of the pit, no problem. But the shayfach lifnei behema, put it in a trough. Don't allow the animal to drink while you're holding on to it. And that was the final statement of the Brayso. Now we have a good chazara from what we learned yesterday. If that's the case, if you cannot hold on to the mana, to the keli, while the animal is drinking, who needed the whole pasibirois? So the Gemara counter asks, what do you mean, what did we benefit? To be able to take the water out of the well or out of the be'er, because you're taking it from a reshus hayachid into the adjacent area that without the pasibirois would be a reshus harabim. So the Gemara clarifies the question. Why did the Mishnah tell you that even when you bring these double posts close, you have to keep it at least far enough for a rosh v'ruba, an animal, to fit? And the reason was, as we learned yesterday, so like this, even if the animal moves around, it's not going to right away go into the reshus harabim. But if anyways you never may hold a keli, who cares? So here, Amar Abaya, as we learned yesterday, this latter part of the Brayso is speaking about a very unique case. Right? That's the picture that we use, that you can look back on the Chaf on the base, and you can see the picture in the Bach, that you have an Evos, so reshus harabim. First of all, there's a trough. The trough is in the public domain. The trough in itself has walls that are 10 tvachim high, and the inside of it is at least 4 by 4, 4 tvachim. And therefore, my friends, it has a din of reshus hayachid. And not only that, but as we learned yesterday. And here you would have wanted to extend your bucket, your hand, outside the pasibirois, but yes, over the trough, which theoretically is taka okay. And you would put it under the mouth of the animal, but over here we are afraid that the trough itself would need some sort of repair. And you, while repairing it, would put the bucket down and then pick the bucket up, and then you would maybe lean it on the edge of the trough. So it is in this case that we tell you that don't put the bucket under the mouth of the animal. All right. So the Gemara continues by limiting a heter. So now we limited the heter of pasibirois. Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, Amar Rav, another heter. Ein burganim bebavel. That in Bavel, even if there is a hut that is within 70 sharayim amas from a city, you may not start counting the 2,000 amas tchum Shabbos from the hut. You ignore it. You can only count it from the edge of the city. Likewise, v'loy pasibirois, the entire heter is never applied in chutz la'aretz. So we're limiting these two heterim to geographical locations.
Rabbi, Rabbi, can you just go over briefly the Indian of Tchum Shabbos, what the Isser is, please?
Okay, sure. L'kula alma, whether it's an Isser d'Oraisa, Rabbi Akiva, or everyone else, the Rabbanon, from where you took in Shabbos, either where you were physically, or from where your meals were, from when Shabbos came in, from there you have either 4 amas in each side, which is called your place, you need 4 amas, Or if it's in a city, that city is called your place, your makim hashvisa. And if you can only walk beyond that, 2,000 amos, which is really not that much. Really not that much.
And what is the Isser in that?
Isser in that is it's based on a pasuk regarding picking up the manna, that when Moshe Rabbeinu told the people not to Pashas B'Shalach, not to get the man, it's not only because if they would have gotten the man, they would have carried it back. The act of walking itself too far is a breakage of Shabbos. Okay. And the heter of that, which helps you a little bit, sometimes the little bit is all you need, is putting food down within 2,000 amos from where you are. So, and you have to have that food there before Bein Hashmashis. So it's as if you took in Shabbos from where your food is, and then you get to count to 2,000 amos from your food, but you still have only 2,000 amos. But if you take in Shabbos in a city, like here in Los Angeles, so you only have 2,000 amos from beyond the boundary of the city. But that really means that we can walk here many, many, many miles as long as we are walking within the city. Now you have to know how to define the boundary of the city. But let's say you define the boundary of the city. Let's say you live in a wall city and no one lives outside the walls. But if there was a burganim, a hut, again, within 70 amos and a bit from the periphery, so that extends the city until the burganim. And you only, if you're taking Shabbos anywhere within the city, if you're going in that direction, you only have to start counting the 2,000 amos from the hut. And if there's a hut here, and then there's a hut here, and then there's a hut here, you end up extending a lot the area in which you can walk in. However, this whole hatir is also limited, says the Gemara, that there is no burganim in bubble, there's no pasivirois b'chutzlars, and the Gemara explains. Burganim in bubble, loy. Why don't we rely on the burganim in bubble? He says, because in bubble there were often flash floods, and these floods would wash away the huts. So therefore, even before the huts were washed away, because of their location, it's considered something so temporary that it's not considered a home, it's not considered an extension of the city. So we began the sugya by saying that Pasei Birois is a heter only la'oilei regolim. Now we're saying it doesn't mean only people going to the Beis Hamikdash. It means doing something similar to going to the Beis Hamikdash, which is going to yeshiva to learn. People traveling from one location to the other. So in Bavel, as well as in Eretz Yisrael, you had big Torah centers, and therefore people would travel every now and then to a Torah center and then back home. And when they would travel, if they would not be able to rely on the Pasibirois, it would be very difficult to travel. So they were matted, like being matted for going to Aliyah Saregel. But since in Chutz La'aretz there weren't large yeshiva centers, so you didn't have people because of this Tzorech mitzvah that would travel with their animals, so they never allowed you to rely on Pasibirois. However, Abel Ibcham, but using Burganim and Chutz La'aretz, yeah. Using Pasibirois in Babel, yeah. Because again, even though the Gemara began by allowing you to use it la'oilei regolim, first of all, part of the trip to Yerushalayim was in Babel itself. Furthermore, it doesn't dafka mean to the Beis Hamikdash, it means also to any other Mikdash ma'at. Ekada Amri, more limiting. Amar Rabbi Amar Av, ein burganim, nor pasibirois, neither in Babel, nor in Chutz La'aretz, and now we have to explain why. Burganim in Babel, loy, as we just explained above, because since the Shchichei Bitkei, there's a lot of flash floods, and those huts would not remain. You can never rely on them, even when they're standing. Why can you not rely on Burganim? The Shchichei got nothing, because there was theft. So when you leave a house outside a city or a hut outside the city, it's just a matter of time. Guys, these are Brazilian ganaf. I'm not an American ganaf with still your radio. But the Brazilian was still the whole house. Understand? The guy will take a wall, he'll take a brick, he'll take a roof. It's Gavaldik. It's a whole different culture. All of a sudden you come back and not they stole you the stuff. The whole house is not there. It's Gavaldik. Because in Babel, there was so much water. You have the Euphrates, you have the Tigris, right? You have these rivers that when people travel, they know they would travel on a river edge. They would not need, and by the way, in there, just like the Gemara began on top of the Amid, a person goes into the well. If you are traveling by the edge of a body of water, you don't have to take the water out. The animals go into the Euphrates. Verstehst? You don't need to have passive erois. Everyone gets to drink. And as we learned above, because since L'Shlicha Mesifta, there was no big yeshiva centers, so there was no Aliyah's Haregel, meaning going to a yeshiva, so therefore they never allowed us to use the passive erois. Amalei Rab Chizda, Lamadei Berei de Rafuna, who was the son of Rabbi Bar Arba, that Amrei, this is what Rab Chizda is telling him, they say that you, Marei, Asisumi Barnish, you live in a village called Barnish, and you regularly would daven in the Beit Mishnah of Doniel, the prophet, who lived centuries earlier. But when he was alive, he davened in a certain shul, and for hundreds of years, they called that shul the Beis HaKnesses of Doniel. Now, Mari would go there would daven their Shabbos. How far was the Beit Mishnah of Doniel from the village, from Barnish? 3 parsa. Guys, appreciate 1 parsa is 4 mil. 1 mil is 2,000 amas. That means that he walked many times over the Tchum Shabbos. Now, what must have been the heter? The heter must have been that there were little huts. But we just said, and again, when you have huts, like we mentioned, it's not that the hut only extends at 70 amas. If you have a hut by 70 amas, within 70 amas and Shirayim, and then you have hut number 2 within 70 amas and Shirayim from hut number 1, and then you have the hut number 3. If that goes on, you can walk the whole world over. You can walk far. But he says, but now we established that you cannot rely on burganim. Amai samchisu, you must have. What did you rely on? It must have been burganim. Ha'amar avua davua mishmei derav. Your father's father said in the name of Rav, in burganim bebavel. That's a kasha. So Money had an answer. So his answer wasn't a word. He showed him. So nafak va'achvele. He showed him. He says, no, the whole reason why we don't rely on burganim is because these little huts, these watchmen's huts, were very flimsy, and flash floods, which happened a lot in Babel, would wash them away. But Hani, go look at Hani Misavasam, go look at these. They had little villages that were ruined. And these ruined villages, mamash, it's a churva, no one lived there. But it's like a hut. There was enough remnant of the buildings that for hundreds of years, with all of the flash floods, they didn't get washed away. And between his Barnish and the Beis HaKnesses of Doniel, always within, you had 70 amas plus, you had a little village. You had another 70 amas, there was another little remnant of a village. So Taka, he had a path to walk all of these parsais without ever walking 2,000 amas outside the permitted area. These little broken towns, the Niba'ula, they are always swallowed within 70 amas and Shanayim. So it's better than Burganim. And even in Babel, yes, you could rely on it. Oh, so now that we mentioned Rab Chizda and Mari Berei de Rafuna, so let's go. I'm sorry. Now that we mentioned just Rab Chizda, because now it's a different Mari. Amar Rab Chizda, Darish Mari Barmar. Rab Chizda here, we're going to have actually 2 pieces of Agadah that Rab Chizda is saying that which Mari Barmar expounded. Ma'idechsiv. Tehillim Kuf Yutes. Right, to every goal, as big as your goal is, everything has a limit. That's a human goal. But rechava mitzvascha, but God, your mitzvahs are rechava ma'oid. And as we'll see here in our Gemara, in our Agadah, here we're putting together Torah and mitzvahs. Actually, we're going to speak more about the Torah. That the Torah is very broad. Now, in Chassidus, we learn whenever we have ma'oid, ma'oid means bli gvul. Very, what is very? There's no limit. Very means the ultimate very, bli gvul. Here in Igla, it's not so. Ma'oid. Now, what does ma'oid mean? How broad are the mitzvahs in the Torah? So he says, Rav Mari Barmar expounded that Davar Zeh Maroi David. David said something about the greatness, the largeness, the broadness of the Torah. But V'lei Perishay, he didn't tell us the limit, the bigger limit. And likewise, Amar Iyuv, also about the greatness of the Torah, as we'll quote a pasuk, V'lei Perishay. Amar Yecheskel V'lei Perishay. Shemba Zechariah ben Idai. Right, Zechariah, the son of Idai, the Navi, he said it and Perishay. Let's go. Amar David V'lei Perishay. What does it mean V'lei Perishay? He said that it's very broad, but he didn't give you the limit. Now, how rechava is it? We don't know yet. Where did ERUVIN, again, we're going from Torah mitzvahs. Because when ERUVIN was speaking about the Torah, he said that arucha me'eretz midah, that it's longer than the earth's measure, and it's broader, it's wider from the sea. So wider than, I know that it doesn't have that minimum limit, but up until where does it go? What are its limits? He didn't say. Amar Yecheskel like Perishoi, the Chassidut says Yecheskel the Vayifrois Oisolofanai, that in this vision he saw how Torah Shabal Peh that was recorded in the heavens there was a document that was spread out, opened up in front of me, and this document had writings of the oral Torah not only in the inside, like we have in our scrolls, panim ve'achar, but how big was the scroll? We don't know. And the Kosav Elyahu, and on it was written, this is all part of the Torah Shabbat Peh, Kinim, Lamentations, Vehege, and Simcha and rejoicing, Vahi and woe. All part in all details in the Torah. Now the Gemara, tangentially on the side, we're explaining what this means. Kinim, when we speak about that in the Torah, you have Lamentations. That refers to in there it's inscribed the Puronasan Shal Sadikim Ba'olam Hazeh. That there is a suffering of tzaddikim, and as the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, ein lanu, we don't understand why. How do I know that the word kina refers to Lamentations, as it says kina hi v'koinanuha, that it is a lamentation and we should lament. That's a right that it refers to the sufferings of the tzaddikim, because if it's referring to other sufferings, then we wouldn't say that you have to lament. The Hege, the next word Hege, which means rejoicing, that goes to the Matnas Chana Shal Tzadikim La'asad Lavai. That's also written in the Torah, in the oral Torah. V'chein hu oimer aleihi goyon b'chinoin, with singing, which is going to be accompanied with a harp. That's where you see the words hi goyon is a lashon of simcha. Vahi wu oivei, that refers to the Purarasam Shal Rishayim La'asad Lavai. V'chein hu oimer hoiva al hoiva tavai. Happenings upon happenings will come upon B'Rishayim La'asad Lavai. But again, the Nakuda is that even though we are already describing some sort of document that's written Panam Ba'achar, but we don't know how big it is. That here he gave you the right limit, so to say, of the vastness of the Holy Torah. And as it says, he also had a vision. And and whether it was a malach, whether it was it's godliness for a malach, is speaking to the Navi. What are you seeing? And this is Zachariah ben Idoy, responds on Idoy Megillah, I see a folded Megillah. And Orka Esrim Ba'amo, it has a width of 20 amas, and it has a length of 20 and a width of 10. First of all, Rashi right away adds over here that when we're speaking about Amos, we're speaking about Amos Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nothing here is literal. Okay, good. We're speaking about a godly Amos, but it's 20 by 10. Then now let's extrapolate by the fact that we learned before that this Megillah upon which Torah is written is folded. Right, Megillah Afa. No, I see a folded scroll that's 20 by 10. So therefore, let's now cheshbon. If you unfold it, so now it's going to be 20 by 20. And since we learned above in Yecheskel that the Torah Shabbat Peh is written there, both in the front and in the back, so it's not 20 by 20. You doubled it. You have how much? You have 40 by 20, right? No, it's unpeel it, unfold it, look at both sides. Now you have 40 by 20. Now 40 by 20, right, is how much? Is 800 square, but let's add Rashi's words, 800 square divine amas. So now we have at least a number. That's the vastness. You needed all that to put down the Torah Shabbat Peh. Now, and it says, guys, we're at the 3 lines on the bottom of the Amid regarding the world, Olam Hazeh. Who is able to measure with his fist all of the waters? God does that. And who establishes the whole heavens with a zeres? Guys, we already said a zeres. If you were to open up your hand, a zeres is from the edge of your thumb to the edge of your little pinky. That's exactly a half an amma. The cheshbon here is that a half an amma is a quarter of a square amma. So all of the heavens, which means the whole universe, is a quarter of a square amma. All of it comes from the Torah. The Torah is 800 square divine ammas. So 800 divided by the quarter, you're going to have approximately 3,200, which means
Rabbi, what is divine ammas?
One second. The Torah is 3,200 times larger than the world. That's the cheshbon we're making. What are you asking, Shlem?
What is divine ammas?
A Amma Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means don't make this into something Gashmi. The Gemara, what Rashi wants to make it clear, we're not talking about the physical space. But in other words, you have now the measurement of the Torah. Let's read it inside. Nimsa kol ha'olam kulai echad mishloishes alafim l'masayim b'Torah. I want to take a moment. I know it's getting late, and it's Agadatus, so we'll try to go quicker on Amud Beis. The Marsha and Chidushi Agada says Gavaldik. I'm reading a little bit inside from the beginning. It says Yesh la'ayin b'maimer zeh. What does it mean that David did not explain it? And we have the David and Eruv and Yecheskel and Zechariah. So he says like this, that Kidarchi Toirehin Dala Drachim. And that is the Erech is Derech Hapshat. Beis is Drush. Third is Derech HaSeichel. And Derech HaSeichel refers to Maaseh Bereishis. And the fourth is Derech Kabbalah Maaseh MERCAVA. V'nasnu lahem simin, part of this. V'amru b'medrash, panim b'panim diber Hashem imachem. So panim is faces in the plural. Taichas the Marsha, panim train, b'panim train. Panim b'panim means that God gave Moshe all four levels, 2 and 2. Harei daled apin l'toira. Ulafish abeis panim she'em apshat dadrush. Since the lower two levels are noigim in nigla, b'mitzvah satoira, that's why kolol yachad in one panim train. Maaseh Bereishis, Maaseh MERCAVA, which are both in the nister, kolol yachad, in the second panim train. V'hashta David lo hiskira kan nigla hanigeh b'mitzvahs. So he says only rechava mitzvascha. Eruv lo hiskira mitzvahs ela ha'torah b'chlala. In other words, he's saying that each one is speaking about from the lowest to the highest. We have Pshat is what the David is talking about, which is why Taka, the Pasuk in Tehillim, is speaking about mitzvahs, because the bottom line of the Torah is to know what to do. The lowest level. And each one is going up to a highest level. And the highest level, now guys, we know a little bit from Hasidus, the highest level by Yas is Chachma. Chachma. The whole beginning of Sefer Yetzirah is Belamed Beis, right? Nesiva is Pliyah is Chachma, Chakak, Yutke, that the creation of the world began when the light that is in Chachma and the Torah's Chachma's Havaya comes into the world. So if there are 32 paths that lead us to Chachma, or that leads Chachma into the world, L'chora, that's the 3,200 we're speaking about. Every time the Torah comes down, it becomes, so to say, more mitzumtzam. All of it is in it, but it becomes limited. Now, I understand the whole sugya, the whole Chaf Aleph Amud Beis will be predicated, including the next Agadah from Rav Chizda Dorish Mari Barmar, is going to be that I just want to say one nekuda, that many people are limited in the way they think. When they think about something great coming down, or God creating the world, they place God up there, and it's very broad, and then it comes down. Okay, you can have that imagination in your head. I want to use a whole different way of thinking, that higher means deeper. Very, very, very deep. Very deep. So it's Rechava or Oirech. And then it starts to come out, it starts to externalize itself until finally it becomes so chitzoniistic that we are able to relate to it. But in whatever you're hopping in it, there is deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And in the core, you have God himself, as Hashem is invested in Chachma, through which God becomes available, so to say, to us. Why am I saying that? That's connected to the next Agadah. The last line of the Amit. The Darish Mari Barmar. My Dichsiva Pasakin Yirmiyah Vihine, behold, Shnei Dudoy Ta'edem, I saw 2 pots of figs. and Mu'adim Lefnei Heichal Hashem. They were both prepared, standing in front of God's Heichal, in front of the Beis Hamikdash. Hadud Echad, one of the pots, had in it Te'enim Toivus White, very good figs. How good? Kite'ene Daf Chaf Aleph Amid Beis. Habakurais, like the figs that ripen first. These are the best figs. Hadud Echad, and in the other pot, Te'enim Rois Moed, very bad figs. Asher Lo Yisrael Chal Lemiroi, but they were so bad that you cannot even eat them. Explains the Gemara what was this image. This is all the drasha that Te'enim Atoivas goes to Tzadikim Gemurim. Te'enim Harois goes to the Shoim Gemurim. What did we just learn in the first Agadah? That within the world, if you go deep, deep, deep down inside, you're going to touch the core. The core is godliness, which also means that by a Yid, no matter how great of a Rasha, sadly, they are at this moment temporarily B'chitzonius, but the pneumius, you have to just know how to go very deep. There is a spark there. So therefore, that's the hemshah. The Shema Tomer Avad Sivra Mabatal Zikoyam. You will think these Rishayim. He saw this pot of disgusting figs. You would think that their hope is gone, that their prospects are naught. Notice when you see something that externally is unedible, Talmud Loimer, that was the whole vision. That Hadudayim, both of these pots, Nasnu Reach, they were giving off a good scent. Elu ve'elu asidim sheyitnu reach. Mamish gavaldik. And in the context of the previous Agadah, we're learning about Torah, that inside every Yid you have Torah. And Torah gives off a good reach. So it's only in there. Once you know that the Torah is much wider than the person, which means that our pneumius is so deep that no matter what we do out here, it's unable to affect the in there. The in here is so deep down, I can't hurt it. So afal pishachata, indeed, Yisraeli. Now that we mentioned this pasuk, Dudoyim literally doesn't refer to these pots of figs, but it refers to violets. So Darash Rava, my dechsev had Dudoyim nasnu reach, that the violets gave off a good fragrance. So that again refers to the Yidden. Elo b'chol Yisrael she'lo yito'amu tamchet. And when the pasuk continues, va'al pisachenu kol migadim, literally, that at our door you had all types of migadim, all types of fine fruits. That refers to B'nai Yisrael. Shemagidois, that they relate, Pischayim, Labaleim, that they tell their husbands, if they became a Nida, they shared their openings with their husbands, because we keep the dinam of Taras HaMishpacha. And that's the beauty of the Jewish people. All of that is what he saw in his vision. Lishnachrina, that the meaning, it refers to the same concept, but the taich, the words differently, Ba'al Pisachenu kol migadim, that the B'nai Yisrael, they close their openings during the times that halachically their husbands cannot be with them, keeping the dinam of Taras HaMishpacha. Then the pasuk continues, Chadashim gam yeshanim, new ones and old ones, Doidi, my beloved one, Safanti loch, I hid for you. What does that mean? That this is what we tell God, that we, the Chachamim, we the Jewish people, we added so many rabbanans, so many rabbinic laws, more than your rules. And vikiyamtem, and we upheld all of them. And all of that ultimately is what God sees, the beauty of the Jewish people. Amar Rav Chizda, lahahum ed rabbanan, dahavakam asadar agadata kamei. So there was, Rav Chizda had someone who was an expert agadata darshan. So he told that one, Misha Miyalach, did you ever hear the meeting guys, the beginning of the first medium-sized line, what do these words mean? Chadashim gam yeshanim, right? New ones and old ones. But the Torah is all chadashim. What does it mean, new ones and old ones? So I'm like, I heard elu mitzvahs kalos, the elu mitzvahs chamuras. So he tells him that's not the pshat. That let's say the kalos will be the old ones, the way I understand it. Because when something is old, you sadly lose, it loses its value. It's old. New mitzvahs, right? You're careful. For you, it's chamur. Amalei Rav Chizda tells this Rabbana, no, don't teach it that way. The chi Torah, pa'amim, litna, was the Torah given at different times? Torah was given at the same time. It's all chadashim. Ella, halalam adivrei Torah, halalam adivrei soifrim, as we learned above. So Yeshanim, that's the whole word. The Yeshanim is what God gave. And then we added new gezeres to what God gave. And that's like a called new, because it's midrabbanans. Darish Rava, My dechsiv there in Koheles that v'yoiser mehema, and more than these, bini my son, hizar be heatful, asoy sfarim harbe, the making of many books, which means the many books refers to the recording of the oral Torah that became more and more and more and more, as we just learned. The Chachamim are adding gezeres, they're adding to the Torah. Bini hizar b'divrei seifrim, yoiser b'divrei Torah. You should be even more careful in Divrei Seifrim, imagine, than Divrei Torah. Why is that? Divrei Torah, when God gives rules, there are different levels. There's a mitzvah saseh, there's a mitzvah lois saseh. Then you have a lois saseh, she'ein be'em kodesh, she'esh be'em kodesh. You have a lois saseh that there is a capital punishment, there's no capital punishment. All different levels of mitzvahs. But by Divrei Seifrim, they're all the same. They're all equally chamur. As the sages tell us, we have this in the beginning of brachas, that kol ha'over al divrei seifrim chayav misa. If you break any rabbinical rule, you're chayav misa. And as Rashi quotes the pasuk in Koheles, upoidetz gaded, whoever breaches the fence, meaning a rabbinic law, a snake will bite him. Now, by the way, before we go on, how do you make sense of that? If God gives a rule, and lav dafka you're chayav misa, sometimes yes, sometimes not. So what? So divrei seifrim should be more chamur? So there's a beautiful insight that Rebbe gives regarding nevuah. By nevuah, we have the same thing, that if a navi tells someone to do something and they violate it, the chayav misa. And the question is, again, Torah is greater than nevius. Everything was given through Moshe. Moshe is the biggest and the master navi. So why don't we have the rules of chiyuv misa for violating divrei navi on the Torah? So the Rebbe explains like this, that Torah is much greater than neviah. Torah precedes the world, which is why the world can never affect the Torah. So, for example, when the Torah says Mashiach is coming, it has to happen. There can never be a circumstance in the world that doesn't allow it to happen. Torah is beyond the world. Then God put it into the world. Nevius was custom made to a specific place and time. Nevius is coming from a lower level of godliness. Now, you can say, so it's lower. Yes and no. From God's perspective, it's lower. But since it's relating more to me and to the here and to the now, so therefore the me and here and now, I have to abide by it even more. Same concept by Divrei Seifrim. As we began in Amud Aleph, that Torah is 3,200. It's coming from Chachma Vatzilus, which is beyond the worlds. The Marsha says 4 levels. Mamash, Asiya, and you go. We're in a world of Asiya, and the Torah is coming from Chachma Vatzilus. So it's beyond us. Yes, it's within everything, but it's hidden. And therefore, if a person, God forbid, violates something, they don't touch it that badly, like we learned above. And at the end, everyone is going to do tshuva. Everyone is going to give reyach. Masha'inkin, something, the divrei seifrim comes from a lower level. So you would say, if a lower level, less important. No, lower level means it's more shayach to me. And therefore, my actions hurt it more. And therefore, God forbid, you have this concept of chayv mis. Now, Shema Toimar, you can ask on the whole oral Torah. Im yesh vehem mamish, if the oral Torah is emes, if the gezeros have to be upheld, then why were they not written in the written Torah? So that's the answer. Amar kra asoy sfarim harbe ein kates. Asoy sfarim we have to make unlimited books. In other words, the Torah that was given to us that we learned that on Amud Aleph. So God put his infinity in something finite. Something finite. The Torah is finite. The Torah Shemal is infinite. If all of the oral Torah would have been written down, then God could never finish giving it to us. What about us? We extrapolate. We're megala a little something from the inner Torah, and we put it down. And the more time goes down on La Fashaba, we are adding and expanding and adding, and it's not limitless. But you can't ask, why didn't God put it to paper? Because if you want to put the whole thing on paper, then there is not enough paper in the world. Because the Torah is so much more, infinitely greater than everything that we have over here. So God hides the kernel within. So it's bli gvul in a finite holder, which is the words of the Torah, and we, the Jewish people, our avodah is to reveal the infinity in it, and therefore we keep on adding and adding and adding. Then it says, weiter in the pasuk, v'lahag harbe yigiyos basar, and much study. V'lahag means much haravanya, ubohem yehege is it brings up, or much study is the weariness of the flesh. What does that mean? In the name of Rachamar Ulam Alamed, let's make as a agada to lahag. It doesn't mean to hurry in learning. Lahag is mita'ayin. Lag means someone who mocks. Call hamalig. Al divrei chachamim. Whoever makes mockery of the words of the chachamim. It's only rabbinic. There's no divinity in that. It's human logic. It's not really part of the Torah, which it is. They're being megala the infinity of the Torah. Then nidan b'tsoyer isachas. Weariness of the flesh is a clean way of speaking about excrement. So whoever is going to be loyeg al divrei chachamim, their punishment will be is that they're going to be cooked in soya roisachas. Maskiv l'ravam miksiv lag. No, it says lahag. Lag means to learn. It means the opposite. It's the positive. That whoever learns the oral Torah, you'll taste the taste of godliness in it. You will see that it's part of Torah. Toyim tam basar, it's always going to taste like fresh meat, which is the most nourishing example of food. Apologize to all of the people that eat vegan. Basar is the best food, and that is what we get when we learn Torah, even the Torah Shabbat. Tan Rabbanim we learned. Now we're speaking about the importance of upholding rabbinic law. That Rabbi Akiva mamish went on Mesiras Nefesh. Listen to the story. Rabbi Akiva, while he was in jail, right? The Romans, Yamach Shemam, right? They ended up skinning him alive. And here we have a Rashi. Either Garsi is the name of the place where his Rabbi Yeshua came from, or it was the name of his livelihood. He was Toichen, Gerisim. In any event, Rabbi Yeshua Garsi was allowed by the Romans to be Mesharasim. He brought him food every day. So he brought, there was a certain amount of water he can bring into Rabbi Akiva, and he went in there every day with that amount of water and food, etc. One day, the guard, the anti-Semite, saw Rabbi Yeshua, and he looked at his water container. Looks like today you brought too much water. Maybe you're trying to dig a hole out, because when prisoners, right, they tunnel out, they need to have water to make the earth moist. I don't allow you to bring all that water in. And what did this guard do is he poured half of it out, and he only gave him half. So he comes to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva sees he only has half of the ration of water. Rabbi Akiva tells Yeshua, don't you know that I'm old? And my life depends on your life. Why didn't you bring in all the water? So Rabbi Yeshua says that I brought. I told him. It wasn't me, it was the guard. So now the problem is that water, he needed half of that water just to do Netilas Yadayim, to have a meal, to have bread. And then you have to drink. But now that he poured half of it out, now he has to pick or choose. Am I going to use the half for Netilas Yadayim, or am I going to use the half for drinking? And we all know, when you live right in Rabbi Akiva, whether it was in Tefilla, wherever that was, it's a hot temperature. You need water. You need to hydrate yourself. Rabbi Akiva tells Rabbi Yeshua, give me the water. I'm going to use it for Netilas Yadayim. So I told Rabbi Akiva, Lishtois, Ein Magian, it's not even enough for you to drink. Even if you were to use all of it for hydration, you would go thirsty. Is little Yedecha Magim, is there enough water for you also to wash your hands? Rabbi Akiva responded, Mo'esa, what can I do? Since the Chachamim, beginning with Shlomo HaMelech, enacted Netilas Yadayim before eating, and as we learned above, that the Divrei Chachamim is godliness. And noch, it's closer to us, and if you break it, you're Chayav Misa. So therefore, Mutav almost Misatz Atzmi, it's better for me to put my death in my hands. I'm going to make a choice that will bring upon my own death. But not to violate Das Chaveda. Now, Tosfos in the second Tosfos points out something very important. We just learned in the last Mishnah of the first Perek in ERUVIN that there were 4 hetadim they gave to soldiers. One of them is that they are exempt of Rechitzas Yadayim. And that's really not unique for soldiers. That's about people that are in Bisakana. So really, by the letter of the Lord, Rabbi Akiva would not have to wash Netilas Yadayim. We learn other pratim, we learn this in brachas, and this is even in Shulchan Aruch, that when you have no water, you can put your hand in a mappa, as long as you don't touch the bread. There are other hetadim that you can make use of when you don't have water. If Rabbi Akiva would be looking for a heter, he would find a heter. But Rabbi Akiva, being that he was a machmer or latzmai, or other times we have the lashon that he was a chassid, that he behaved l'fnei mishuras adin. B'chal we have in Gemara many times that the great chachamim have to behave l'fnei mishuras adin, because when we look at them, we right away we say, if they are doing A, then I only have to do B. People go down a notch. So if they are doing the minimum, then the down a notch is violations. So Rabbi Akiva decided that he's going on Mesilas now. Did he live? He lived benes, but he didn't drink. Amru, and indeed they say that loitam klum achehevi loimayim. So Rabbi Shua Garsi didn't want to give him the water for Netilas Yadayim. He felt bad for him. Rabbi Akiva says, if you're not going to give me the water, I won't even eat. And he didn't eat until the water was brought, and he used all of the water for Netilas Yadayim. And Kishashom Chachamim B'davar Amru, they said that that if this is the koyach of Rabbi Akiva when he was in his older years, imagine when you're older, it's harder to tolerate suffering. You get weaker. Is b'yaldusay alachas kama v'kama. Guys, appreciate what the Gemara is really saying. We know the yaldusay of Rabbi Akiva. What did we learn above? Again, that there's something very deep in the Torah. There's something very deep in Eid. And our external behavior can never touch it, which is why there's always tshuva. And not only that, but we also will learn in Yuma and in other places that when a Yid does tshuva, then the avoinos becomes zechuyos. In other words, the azat tshuva from Rabbi Akiva, that's the beyaldusai, the transformation. Ma bebeis asurim kach. His dedication, his commitment to uphold even the dinei derabanan. Weiter. Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel, gewaltet slave, but this is so geschmack. The shosha tikim shleme ERUVIN and Felice Yadayim. Now, guys, ERUVIN refers to ERUVI Chatzeros speaker. He was not the one that made ERUVI Tchumen. Netilas Yadayim, by the way, he did not make it. Brachas, he did not make it the way we do it now. He began it. He said that kohanim have to wash their hands for kachim. That was the beginning of the Shemona Asar Davar. It began with that there's something called a hand that's tamei. And therefore it can make a shniyos, and it can make truma shlishi. It can make kachim for sure shlishi. It can be preiselas truma matama es kachim. So he began that. When he made that, Yotzasam Baskol Va'amra, Vini, that tells Shlomo HaMelech, Im chacham libecha, if there's wisdom in your heart, if your heart is wise, so that yismach libi gamani, my heart shall rejoice too. Going back to the concept of chachma, right? That Torah is chachmas havaya, and Shlomo HaMelech was able to grasp the chachma of Atzilus, and he was able to bring it down, to be megala more of it. And the concept of simcha we learn in Hasidus is something that breaks a boundary. You know, there's a certain level of godliness in the Torah that's concealed, and whenever it's revealed, that is the meaning of joy. Simcha is played its gedit. And so if chacham b'ni, be wise. The samach libi, and my heart will rejoice. And for those who mock me, there were people that were criticizing about what's Shlomo HaMelech, and the fact that Shlomo HaMelech was the one through whom the chachma of the Torah, the chachma of God, regarding the Netilas Yadayim and ERUVIN became revealed, that gave God, so to say, a response to all those who did not until then appreciate the greatness, the high level of Shlomo HaMelech. What's the meaning of the pasuk? Come, my beloved one. Come out with me into the field. Let us sleep in the villages. Nashkima, let's wake up early to go visit the vineyards. Nida, for us to see in Parcha Geffen, to see if the vine flowered, to see if Pita Hasmadar, to see if the grape blossom opened. Hey, Neitzu Hadamayim, to see if the Remoinim began to blossom. Sham, dear, my beloved, I will give my love to you. Sham etnes doidilach. So what's the meaning of this pasuk? Taichas the Gemara, guys. We are in the first widest lines, in the middle of the line. Who's speaking to whom? So there's God speaking to the Jews, and we're here, it's us speaking to the Eibishter. When you judge us, don't look at those of us who live in the cities. What happens in the cities? The Sheyesh Vahem in cities, there's more crime, there's gazel, there's theft, and there's arroyos, and there's vain oaths, and there's false oaths. Look at those of us who live in the field. Who lives in the fields? People that can't afford to buy a house in the big cities. Come and look at the Eden that are committed, even when they don't have the money to live in the villages. And that's the pshat. Nalina bikfarim, let us sleep in the villages. It means al tikrei bikfarim, ella bikoifrim. Contrast. Look at the Talmidei Chachamim that even though they're suffering begashmis, they're still committed. Contrast that with those koifrim. The koifrim are the other nations. The other nations to whom God gave so much abundance. This refers specifically now to Edom, to Rome. Even though you gave them so much good, but they're koifir. They're koifir in you. They are taking God out of society. And then we tell God, Nashkima, let us arise early, likramim. Come early into the Kedem. What is the Kedem referring to? It refers to Batim Chesiyas and Batim Midrashes. That's a Yid. A Yid wakes up early to learn until today. So we tell God, don't judge us. Come early in the morning into a shul when it's still dark outside. And Nira, go see in Parcha Gefen of the vine flowered. What does that refer to? Go look at those. What is the vine? Bali Mikra. Gavaldik. Bali Mikra, because the wine, when the vine is just flowering, so the wine is many, many levels deep concealed in it. Right? It's not even a ripe grape that already has kamat vine in it. No, we're speaking about that in the mikra, you have the highest level of godliness concealed in it. The smador is when the grape begins already to bud. That's already bala mishnayis. Mishnayis comes from the world of bria, right? Really, everything comes from chachma datzilus, but it comes through chachma bria. Heinetzu hademoinim. The demoinim goes to the bali gemara. And come look at the Eden. This one is learning Chumash, that one is learning Mishnayos, we're learning Gemara. And Shama, over there, we tell God, there we will give our love to you. Which means that at Acha, Kavoidi, Vigoidli, Shevach, but there you'll see the greatness, the praise of my sons and daughters, as we learned above, that the young men and women that are married, that they keep Taras HaMishpacha. This is what we tell God. All of that is out of love to God. What's the meaning regarding Shlomo HaMelech? Used to give 3,000 metaphors, and his song was 1,005 songs. What does that mean? That means for every word in Torah, Shlomo HaMelech gave 3,000 examples. The Chassidus says not 3,000 different examples. Shlomo HaMelech was able to reach Chachma Vatzilus, and he wanted to bring it down to us, but it's concealed. It's much rechava ma'id. So he needed to enclose it in a mashal. So he gave an example to understand an example 3,000 times. That means he was able to bring down the chachma of the Torah all the way down on Olam Hazeh. It underwent 3,000 steps. Now we learned above 3,200. Epis avodah we have to do on our own. We got to go up a little bit, but he brought it much more down to us. I'll call Seifrim, as we said above, that Divrei Seifrim don't come from such a high level. Divrei Seifrim are godliness from a lower level. That's why we're Chayiv Risa. But to bring down Divrei Seifrim, you didn't have to bring it down 3,000 levels. He had to bring it down 1,005 nigunim. The melody, nigunim is a koyach in which you bring down wisdom. Like the word of the Baal Shem Tov, the word that the Alter Rebbe chazet. That yoytzim b'shir, v'nechnasim b'shir, v'chulei. And what does that mean? That chamesh ve'elef ta'amim. Gewaldik. Okay, Doresh Rav, might say another few lines. That v'yoyser, even more than that. That Koheles was a chacham. Not only was he himself a chacham, but oid limit das esoam. He was able to bring das to the people. The Izen and Shlomo HaMelech knew how to listen. The Chiker, he knew how to dig deep. And Tiken, he knew how to rectify. Many examples. Limit das esoam. How did he bring the Torah to the people? The admirei b'simanei kamim. Because when he taught Torah, he taught it always by singing a melody. That's the koyach of music. You bring something very lofty. An emotional experience, you can experience. You can bring it down. And if you're good enough, you can bring Chachma down through a melody. Rashi, 9 lines from the bottom, says that Shlomo HaMelech didn't only teach us the Mesoidas of the Tamim in Tanach. We know, at least when we read the Chumash and Shul, we read it with Tamim. But this Bein B'Tevas HaMikra, Bein B'Girsa Shal Mishnah, When Shlomo HaMelech wrote Mishnah, I know that Mishnah was written down by Rabbeinu HaKadosh, but Mishnayos came from Moshe Rabbeinu, Torah Shebaal Peh. So we had Mishnayos, we learned it by heart. He taught it with a melody. It was a zanigina. Who didn't hear from their teachers learning with Anigan? My father always learned with Anigan. That's all came from Shlomo HaMelech. That nigan allows you to have access to levels of chachma that without the nigan that would be beyond you. And he would explain things by using mishalim, ve'izen v'chikir v'tikin mishalim harbe, gevaldik and amarullah, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Indeed, before the Torah was like a basket, like a kfifa that had no handles, because the Torah is so rechava, we were unable to grasp it. That was Shlomo HaMelech, that he got the source, and then he had the bigger koyach of bringing it down. V'asalah Znaim will stop over here, God willing, to be continued. Almost finished. All right, good. Ashreinu. Amazing.
Thank you.
People speak bad about him. No.
Some great agarta.